had a question regarding navigating modeler, and it's not that easy. There are a lot of things to keep track of, so I thought I'd just make a video, and if you're a newbie, then this would help you out. So we're going to look at two things: functions and shortcuts. So hitting A will zoom everything in the view. So it will, if you have objects way up here, then it will zoom in on that area. Control A will zoom in on a selected object. Because I should say zoom selected here. F2 is center data, and as you can see, this box is now centered. So if it wasn't centered, if it was skewed off, you could press F2 and it would just center it like this. Rest and ground is sort of like the same thing, but it does center it based on your settings. So for example, you can make this object rest on the Y axis. These are the navigating shortcuts, so that's Alt, Shift, and Alt Control. Alt rotate, or I mean Alt is basically rotate, so you go here and you hold down Alt and it will rotate for you. Sometimes that will kind of like end up being screwed up though, and that's because Lightwave has the ability to rotate in any direction. It can also rotate over the y-axis. Not all programs can do that. And that means that this axis right here, you see this axis here, can become skewed, and that's why I have the symbol here to explain to you that if that happens, it can be a good idea to use circle movements to line that axis back up. Alt Shift is move. Oh, by the way, if you use Alt in these views, it's going to change to the move tool, because these are orthographic views. They're flat views. So just remember that. Rotate is not going to work on orthographic views. Move is Alt and Shift in perspective view. So Alt and Shift to move. Alt and Control is zooming. I guess that is yep. Alt and Control is zooming. Numeric. I just put this here because they're going to use that a lot. So hit N on the keyboard to bring up the numeric panel. I don't think we're going to cover that too much in this video, but well, here it is. N for numeric. Hitting 0 on the numpad will change the viewport view. So if I hit 0 on the numpad, it will focus on this one if I hover over that view, and this one hovering over that view, and this one hovering over that view. Note that this is 0 on the numpad and not 0 next to the space. I mean the backspace. If you hit 0 next to the backspace, that's gonna that's a shortcut for clicking on layer number 10. So you don't want that. Okay, that's it for shortcuts, I guess. You should also be aware of these guys here: action center, mouse, selection, pivot, origin. And also, of course, holding down Alt is not going to rotate the object itself. To rotate the object, you need to hit Y on the keyboard, and you're going to get this symbol, and that actually looks very much like this symbol. It actually is exactly the same, come to think of it. Okay, so, but now I'm using the rotate tool. If I go to modify here, you'll see that it's under rotate. I got R on my computer as a shortcut. Anyway, so that's what you'll use for rotating the object. Now you'll see though that rotating that object in this view with the rotate tool is not going to get you far. It's not very useful. So what you'll do instead is you'll use the transform tool, and you'll click on one of these guys and you'll rotate it like that, and perhaps bring up the numeric, press N, come on. Oh, sorry, I changed my shortcut. Press N, and then you'll get this. And of course you can, type in whatever and rotate it. In these views, I prefer to use the regular rotate tool though. It can be faster. And here's where mouse selection and pivot comes in. So for example, if I use mouse here, I can click here and rotate it, and it will rotate the box based on that position. If I have it set to selection and I click here, it's not going to rotate it here. It's going to rotate it based on the selection. Nothing is selected now, and that means that everything is selected. So even though I click here, it's going to rotate around this area. Let's do something different. Let's take these guys and use action center selection and the rotate tool, and you'll see that it rotates it like that. So no matter where I click, it will always rotate it in the same way because I got action center selection. Action center pivot will use the 0, 0, 0 position as a rotation reference. Honestly, I very seldom use that. You can see how that works. So you'll be using either this one, action center selection, or this one, action center mouse. I always have it set to action center selection. That's just what I prefer to do because I rarely use this action center mouse. If I do that, I use other tools, but it happens though. So there are differences when rotating the object and rotating the view. Now remember this symbol here I talked about? If this object is not lined up properly, you can see kind of like how it's going like that. And if you want to rotate this back now, it can be kind of difficult at times. This time around it was easy, but sometimes it's just tricky. And what you'll do, or what you can do rather, is to make circle movements to rotate it. See how that works? So clockwise circle movements will go like that, and counterclockwise movements will go like that. It can be useful, the trick can be useful if you're stuck and you're just going like, this will not rotate back to the position I want it to be. Well, use the circle movement. These guys here, you can move the object by clicking these symbols, or rather pan the object and zoom and stuff, but usually these guys are not used. They're kind of like they're often a last resort option if you're, I don't know. Honestly, I can't remember the last time I used these guys. I think maybe when I used my left hand only or something like that. I don't know. This symbol right here is toggling the view. So that's basically the same as pressing 0 on the numpad. So instead of doing that, you can click this symbol, and now this view will be full screen. Click it back to go back to the quad. And also, if you want this view to be full screen, you can click here and click back here. As far as the views here, this is the top view, this is the back view, and this is the right view. You usually don't want to change that. You just want to leave this as this, and you want them to be set to wireframe. You can use other options here, but usually this is set to wireframe. So keep it like that. As you know, in the beginning, keep it like that. Here, however, we're more often going to change well, not this one. You can change it for the UV texture view and back to perspective view. We're not going to look into UV texture now. What I wanted to show you was this. We got wireframe, and sometimes you want to use that view. And we got our wireframe shade. This is what I use the most. And we got smooth shade. I also use that a lot for previews. More seldom weight shade, texture, and texture wire, but they are used as well. Of course, these are, you have to use these when you're texturing UV mapping, because these other views are not going to show your texture. You're going to have to use texture and texture wire. But usually this one is the one I stick with when modeling. What else? What else? Yeah, sometimes you'll find that your viewport is not quad, but it looks like that. And this is where you change that. You go in here and go like that. Let's make this go back to quad, and this is what most guys use. But of course you got these options as well. There are also other options as for hiding polygon selection, showing or not showing the grid, showing or not showing points, showing point selection or not. Yeah, and also of course edge selection, showing them or not. This, you basically always have these on. Sometimes for viewing the object, you'll turn them off if there's something, if these guys clutter up your view, then you can turn them off and still tweak it. So that's the thing now, I can still tweak those guys even though they're not visible. Oh, Control Z, of course, is undo. Yeah, back to rotating this guy in the perspective view. That is, you don't really want to use the normal rotate tool. What you want to do is you want to use the transform tool, and you'll just go like this and hit N and change the rotation, hit enter, and that's that. It can be kind of tricky at times to, for example, get this what's it called, this gizmo, it's called a gizmo, to be placed where you want it. Sometimes this will not be in the middle, and if it's not in the middle, then it can be quite tricky actually to make it go in the middle, because now how can I make that go back? That's kind of like tricky. So what we'll do here is we'll say choose pivot and just zero that out and hit accept. Yeah, that's one way of doing it. The move tool, well, you know, I don't really need to cover it. Well, actually, there is one thing. The move tool, what you can do here is you can use the move tool and hold down Control and drag like that, and it will move like this. Of course, that also works on these orthographic views, these flat views. So holding down Control here, it will stick to this x-axis. So I can go like this now, but I can't really move this since I'm looking at it from this point of view. I can only hold down Control and move it like that, or like this. I cannot move it down the X. In order to move it down the X, I'll have to change the view and go like that. I wish there was a shortcut for doing that in this view, but currently this is how it is. So if you want to move that down the x-axis, you'll actually have to rotate it slightly and move it down here. Or, of course, we got the transform tool, and we can move it down like that. I'm not going to cover this tool too much, but using the stretch tool in perspective view is not recommended unless you know what you're doing. So like 95% out of the time you don't want to use the stretch tool in this perspective view because it's going to screw it in the wrong way. So what you want to use instead is the transform tool, and click here, for example, and stretch it out by clicking this symbol here, or yeah, something like that. Now of course you can see that there's a big difference between choosing this one and going like that, because you can see it doesn't really preserve the curvature here. What we need to do in order to do that is to take this one and expand the selection, and then either use the move tool or right click here and use the transform tool. That will keep this curvature. Okay, the last thing is F2 and F3, centering the data. So if I hit F2, it's going to center the data like that. Do note though that if I got a polygon here or something like that and I center the data, it's going to look like that. So be careful having junk data in the viewport, because that's going to screw things up. So delete that and center the view. And the last thing is rest on ground, F3, and that's basically just resting the object on an axis. So in this case, with these settings, it will rest it on the y-axis, and that's good. And I can make it rest on the z-axis in the plus direction, so that's going to make it why can't I rotate this now? I should be able to rotate this, and this should be real time. Unfortunately it's not. You just have to guess that you're doing the right thing if you're a newbie. Hit OK and it aligns it like that. So press F2 again to center it and rest on ground on this axis like that. And of course there's like, you know, other ways going about this. There's like, you know, tons of options as for aligning, but this is an introduction video, so I think I'm just going to leave it at this. I probably forgot something important, but you know, there's like a ton of stuff to learn when navigating Modeler. Once you learn it though, I mean, it's just straightforward. It's going to be like riding a bike. So yeah, I think that's about it.